Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, From Research Discovery to Innovation, Strategies for Success. This is the fifth webinar in a 5-year series hosted by the Center for Sustainable Materials Chemistry in collaboration with the National Collegiate Inventors and Innovators Alliance. My name is Nicholas Gernon. I'll be your moderator today. Our distinguished presenters are Dr. Bruce Branchaud, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Oregon, and Mr. Nathan Lillegard, Program Manager for the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Oregon. Let's get started by revisiting our definition of innovation and talking a little bit about why scientists and engineers should place a high value on this important concept.
Hi, this is your session not moderator, but background host, Gabby session. Nick, we appear to be having a little bit of audio difficulties. Okay, while Nick is working out his audio issues, I will move ahead here to introducing our panelists, Dr. Bruce Branchaud. Thank you, Professor Emeritus, Department of Chemistry, University of Oregon. Bruce has been with the University of Oregon since 1983. He also has a distinguished career in industry from 2005 to 2011 as the Director of Global Chemistry in Nitrogen and Research Fellow Leader for Emerging Technologies in Chemistry at Life Technologies. Bruce has been involved in a number of startups, including Supersensor Technologies, which received funding from NSF I-Corps program, which is run by Steve Blank, and the NSF SBIR program, and ONAMI. Bruce's background is in chemistry from the University of Massachusetts and from Harvard University for his PhD. And he was an NIH postdoctoral fellow at MIT. We also have with us Mr. Nathan Lillegard. He's the program manager for the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Oregon. Nathan's passion really is new ventures and innovation and helping students on the path from research to innovation to venture. His experience also includes startups by co-founding Organic, which is a genetic research company. And he's advised several science and technology-based startups and is working with a community of student entrepreneurs to help them grow. And Nick, I believe, are you back online? Would you like to introduce yourself and explain your background?
I am back online. My background is clearly not in IT, but I apologize for the delay. My audio just completely cut out and I had to reboot. I'm back, and my background is I'm currently a graduate student in the CSMC, focusing on research to improve the efficiency of silicon-based solar cells. I got a BS in chemistry at Bates College back in 2001. And my master's in chemistry from the U of O in semiconductor device processing. Prior to enrolling at the U of O, I was working in the pharmaceutical industry as an analytical chemist for about 8 years, first with Pfizer, and then with a small company called Targacent. Currently, I'm working at an internship at Solar World in Hillsboro, Oregon. We are a solar panel manufacturer and work in research and development while working towards a PhD in the Petro Lab.
Wonderful. With that, I will hand it over to Nathan and Bruce so they can get us started.
Okay, thank you, Gabby. Nick, would you like to go back to the to those couple of slides that we missed while you were having your technical difficulties?
That'd be great if you think we have time.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be useful for context.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's get started by revisiting our definition of innovation and talking a little bit about why it's actually important for us as scientists and engineers. This is a quote from an NSF press release that I really liked. Innovation is defined by more than a single event or brilliant idea. It's about a process, a series of steps that anyone can take to discover new solutions that meet pressing needs or that add value to existing products, services, or technologies. The key idea here is that the successful implementation of an idea is the innovation. It makes the distinction between the invention or the discovery and the actual implementation into an existing process or an improvement in a product. Now, why is innovation important to research scientists? Well, discoveries that further our understanding of the world around us and add to the collective knowledge of the human race are certainly not without merit. However, if we seek to improve outdated products and processes and make an appreciable contribution to the development of a responsible, sustainable path forward, the process of innovation is a necessity. We first have to make the discovery and then work towards evolving it into a value-adding and self-supporting innovation. So what that means is that the excitement of the initial breakthrough signifies the beginning of the process, not the end. From there, we must assess the potential value, identify opportunities to implement it, and then develop a path forward. I imagine I speak for many of my fellow graduate students when I say that the first part of this process is pretty easy to envision. We design and execute experiments all the time, and some of us are fortunate enough to discover something really exciting from time to time. The part that comes next, however, might be a bit of a black box. How do we take a discovery and identify a real-world application for it? And after that small hurdle is overcome, what happens next? We're very fortunate to have Bruce and Nathan here with us today to address these questions, as they bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from all aspects of the discovery to innovation process. The format of today's webinar, have we already gone through the, discuss the format?
No, not yet.
Okay. So the format of today's webinar will be a little bit different from webinars we've held in the past. Bruce and Nathan will co-present on our topic, speaking from their respective areas of expertise. And then we'll open the floor for questions and discussion. The panelists will then summarize their points, provide a take-home message. So thank you for your patience. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. And at this point, I'll hand the mic over to Bruce and Nathan so they can begin.
All right, thank you. There we go. All right, so thanks, Nick and Gabby, for the introduction. This is Nathan Lillegard, Program Manager at the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Oregon. Bruce?
Yeah, I'm Bruce Branchaud, Professor Emeritus in Chemistry, and involved in some startups, and of course I had the previous experience in the biotech industry.
Great. So we're honored and excited to talk with you all today. Thank you for tuning in wherever you may be. If there are those of you here in Oregon, at Oregon State or U of O, I hope you're enjoying the pizza. And if you're not there, then hopefully you've got a good lunch to take home as well. What we want to talk about today is sort of four things. What this thing called the lean startup movement is and why it's different and why you should care about it. Following that on, discussion of the customer development process, which is really what the foundation of lean startup and sort of a new paradigm of thinking about entrepreneurship. We'll go through a description of a business model. For those of you who are not in the business world, this will be probably like drinking from a fire hose of business terms and concepts, but there's a lot of reference materials available that you could follow up with, so bear with us and we'll get through it and then recommend some reading materials afterwards, and then we'll have some Q&A. So we'll get started here. Let's see. All right, so Bruce can talk a little bit about where some of these materials come from.
Yeah, Steve Blank is one of the world leaders in this so-called lean startup, lean launchpad movement. And we'll be referring a lot today to a lot of the things he's generated. We took a lot of slides from a fairly recent presentation that he gave on this topic. He's talking about this all the time everywhere. He's leader of the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps, which I think many of you may already be well aware of, a new way to try to take inventions that were developed in academic labs and convert them into new startup businesses. And I was fortunate enough a year ago to go through a training with Steve Blank at Stanford through I-Corps for a few months. So I'll try to hit some of the highlights of what we learned from that and tie it into the context of what Nathan and I are going to talk about today. So let's go to the next slide. So the basic idea with this movement is it's a new way to figure out how to do something that has business impact with the great scientific accomplishment that you already have. And one of the key concepts is a customer discovery process. It's to take what you know and figure out why would somebody want to use it and why would somebody be willing to pay for it. And I guess one of the points I want to make here quickly today without going into a whole lot of depth on lots of different aspects of that is this is actually very much like a scientific discovery process. If most of us are scientists and we know how to do science, generate hypotheses, do testable experiments, evaluate the data, and then move forward from that. And I think the great insight that Blank had was you can apply the same sort of scientific method to business development. And so the main point here is that after you have done your research scientifically, you've got your publications, your thesis, maybe you even have your patents. You may think you've got it all figured out, but you're just getting started. You want to ask, what is the business value of what I have? And that requires an entirely new set of hypothesis generation, questioning, testing to determine what is the business value of the great science that you've already done. So just keep that in mind, that if you're a scientist and you know how to do science, you should be able to take that kind of a mindset and a thinking and a methodology and apply it to business development. It's the same methods with a different objective. So I'll turn it over to Nathan now for a little more on that.
Yeah, so my experience with science is as a co-founder of a scientific company based on a molecular biology innovation from my co-founder, who's a professor here at the Institute of Molecular Biology. And I will confess that I knew absolutely nothing about molecular biology when I started this company. What I did know a little bit about was business, and I had a co-founder who was willing to get on the journey with me and go forward and figure it out as we went along. We were successful and got the company up and running and got it operating, and it's still operating to this day. But the tools that we're going to talk about here are things that I can say would have been really helpful 5, 6 years ago when I was getting my company started. Sort of the way to think about starting a company has evolved over the last decade, and this guy Steve Blank and Eric Ries and some other people have sort of crystallized these concepts and now teach about it and talk about it, and they've given names to the things that I can say honestly would have been really helpful for me in my process. So what's new with quote-unquote lean startup versus a traditional business model or business plan development? Well, in the lean startup world, you talk about the business model and you talk about your hypothesis about your customers and the market. In a traditional business planning environment, and this is one of the reasons that sort of people will question the value of writing a business plan, is that it was all about a plan. It was all about how do you implement it. It wasn't about finding your business. It was about just implementing this business idea that you happen to have. Well, I think failure rates for startups indicate that that's not always the best way to go about it. So in the lean startup world, rather than focus on product management in a linear fashion, you work on customer development and this GOOTB, get out of the building, where you actually go out and talk to people about your ideas. You work iteratively and agilely to develop things rather than sort of a classic engineering mindset, which is, okay, get all the specs, get it all spec'd out, and then build it and see if people will buy it. That can be a big waste of money, and that's part of the reason that lean startup exists, because a lot of people were realizing they were building stuff that customers didn't want. And companies were either then running out of money and going under, or if you're in a big existing corporation, you were spending a bunch of money to build something before you really knew if customers wanted it. So it's all, the new paradigm is all about focusing on adaptability and speed and measuring what matters in terms of how much does it cost to get a customer, how much turnover do you have in your customer base, and it's really about speed and getting to market fast. In fact, failing fast. If you have an idea that isn't a very good idea, you should go test that and get customers to tell you, you know, that's not really something we need, and then you don't waste a bunch of time and money and people's time and money working on something that doesn't matter. So that's really what's new. I would say it's not necessarily new thinking, but it's just been crystallized and put together in concepts that now people can get behind and talk about. So startups are not a startup company. If any of you are thinking about starting a company, is not a smaller version of a big company. This little graphic here, you know, mid-20th century management theory is basically, here are the tools I need to administer a big business. You know, and that's sort of what people see as the MBA curriculum. I would say that there are lots of things you need to know about running a business that you can get from an MBA, accounting, finance, marketing, management, theory, etc. But those are not always applicable in the same way to a smaller company, to a startup. You need different tools, different skill sets to get a small company off the ground. And that's just fundamental to the nature of what you're trying to do. A little trouble advancing here. Hold on one second. There we go. So it's all about searching for the business model and talking about what is a startup. And what a startup is really a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So what does that mean? It's temporary in that ideally if you have a startup, it's either going to fail or it's going to become a real business. But the startup phase is a temporary, is temporary. And you're searching for a repeatable and scalable business model in this process. So you're searching for something that you can do over and over again for a big market that allows you to capture a significant economic value. That's what a startup is, and you're searching for that in the process. So it's all about turning the hypothesis and hypotheses of your idea into facts, and Bruce can take this.
Yeah, so I'd like to just go through a few slides and some ideas on this. The basic idea is you go through a set of experiments and basically test your hypotheses. If we're scientists, we'd call them hypotheses. Business people here call them guesses. It's really the same thing. You want to ask a question and find out whether there's some value to the kind of thing you're suggesting or thinking about. So let's go ahead. Skip ahead one more. Yeah, so let's take a look at this slide. These are the 4 steps in the customer development process. The first 2 are the search process, and the second 2 are the execution. So in that first part, customer discovery and validation, you ask a question of whether there's some value in what you have that a customer might be willing to pay money for, and then you go out and test it by actually talking to customers. When you go through the Lean Launchpad, Lean Startup training with Steve Blank through the I-Corps, for example, it was mandated that we talk to at least 100 different potential customers to get their input. And this was more than just getting on the phone and making a quick call. It was really interviewing people and getting a lot of insight. Called in Stimson Carroll, who's our president, really did a lot of the very significant, very valuable work in our particular company that we were trying to develop. I think the main point is you need to ask a question, go out and test it by talking to people based on the information you gather from that, pivot, and refine and refine and refine until you come up with something that you think is not only scientifically sound, but people would actually pay money for it. And then you go into the next phase, the execution. You start to build a set of customers and then go ahead and actually develop the company. One of the key points that Steve Blank brings out, let's go back one slide to this, get out of the building if you could. Go forward a couple. Is get out of the building. Steve Blank said, yeah, we can go to the next one, that's good. Steve Blank says no facts inside the building, so get out of the building. And just go out and talk to people. And just get as much information you can from people who would actually be potential customers. So I guess we can flip forward just another slide or two. So this just kind of shows this in a sort of a cartoon fashion. But I think the main point that we want to summarize here on this idea of customer development is it's like a scientific research project. You ask questions, you go out and test them, you gather data, you analyze the data, you develop new hypotheses, and eventually, ideally, after enough of that scientific approach to customer discovery and business development, you know that you have something that people will pay you money for to build this scalable, sustainable, repeatable business model.
So if in the spirit of getting out of the building and going to talk to people, where do you find the folks to talk to? Who do you step out of the building onto the street, which way are you going to go? The first thing you can think about is what are the potential markets to target? So let's say, for example, you have a scientific tool. You have a molecular biology device or some reagent or something like that. Well, in the world of science, in my experience, scientists love to innovate new things for other scientists. So go talk to those scientists and ask them, do you have a need that this device or product or thing can solve? So find your potential markets and go target and talk to those people. And a key component is not just speaking with people who you think are a really high probability customer, but go find people who you need to explain the value of your idea to. You need to explain what is this thing, what does it do, why should I care? If people are asking those questions, then that's good. You're going to be gathering good information. So you talk to the people you know in the market, and then also in any industry and market, some of the best people to talk to and to inquire about the potential for new products are the sales and marketing folks of existing companies. Because their job is to be out there, talk to customers, and get feedback from customers on what they want. And oftentimes, especially in big corporations, the intelligence gathered by the sales force very rarely trickles up to product development. So salespeople might have their finger on the pulse of what the market needs, and those big companies may not be offering that. And the thing that you're thinking about selling could be a big opportunity, and that's the best way one of the best ways to find out is to talk to sales and marketing folks in your respective markets. So customer development is all about the entrepreneurial journey, and we'll talk more about the business model canvas in a minute, but it's a process where you put a whole bunch of your ideas down on paper and then refine those by asking questions, testing your hypothesis, hypotheses with interviews and discussions with people who could potentially be your customers. And that's often hard to do. And the most important thing of all that is, when you get around to asking, well, would you actually pay for this? And if the answer is yes, then great, you've got a business. And if the answer is no, then you need to keep working on your science. So the essential elements of all this is that it's a repeatable cycle. It's in the red dots here, in the red circles, it's the build, measure, learn cycle. So you build something, whatever that may be, and maybe it's software, maybe it's a prototype of some device. You put it out there in front of your customers, you measure what their response is in some way. You take that data, you learn from it, and then you push that data into your next ideas and repeat all over again. It's just a very simple cycle. We see these cycles all the time. So it's a wash, rinse, and repeat, right? Do it again. It's never done. When you make changes to a potential product, someone suggests, oh, well, I'd like it better if it did X, Y, Z. Well, okay, put XYZ feature in if you can, and then go test that with the same people that you talked to before. And some of them may say, oh, that's awesome, I didn't even think about that. Some of them may ask, well, why did you add that? And it might be a request from one customer that needs a feature when really the rest of the market doesn't care. So it's all just data. You got to synthesize it into learning. One of the things that I tell my students is, you're going to get a lot of feedback on your ideas. Neither overreact nor underreact to what people say. Just take it in as information and then think about it in the context of where you are and what you were getting about, what sort of information you were gathering from your potential customers. So what is a business model? We're going to talk a lot about this, and I'll just go through it. So Bruce, you want to cover it?
Yeah, I think the business model, very briefly, and Nathan will go through each of these elements in great detail in the next several minutes. But business model is different from business plan. A business plan is what you will do to actually run your business, or how you will do it. The business model is the ideas and the concepts and the key value that you'll be able to generate. So it has 9 essential features. Nathan can go through these in a few minutes, but it's basically a way of organizing your thinking to find out what it is that's of great value to your business and your customers, and then how you deliver that value to the customer. So once you have a business model discovered, and you'll discover the model through the customer discovery process, where you set up a series of ideas on your business model canvas. You go out and test the ideas. Depending upon the data you gather, you revise and come up with a new business model canvas. Eventually, you will have a model or an idea of what you're going to make, what value it has to the customers, and how you will deliver that value to the customers, and also, finally, how you're going to make money at doing it. But the model is more of like a concept than a plan of action. And Nathan can go through the different elements of it. Each of them has a different value in terms of putting it together to have a complete picture of what you're going to do, the value it generates to the customer, how you're going to deliver that value, and how you're going to make money from doing it.
So the canvas, which you'll learn more about, is basically divided into 2 sections or two focuses. One is value. What's the value that your idea can deliver? What customers are you targeting? What customer segments are you looking at? Is this are you targeting academic customers? Are you targeting commercial customers? Are you talking to consumers or businesses? These are customer segments. How do you build relationships with your customers, and what channels are there to reach these customers? I'll explain all these terms in a minute. Then you talk about the other side of the equation is costs. What things are you doing? That's the key activities. What things are you working with other people to do for you? What resources do you need to deliver your value? What are the cost structures involved with all that? And then what's the revenue stream? How many units of X are you selling for Y that equals Z amount of revenue? Very simple business equations. And I ask my students this all the time. I say, revenues minus costs equals profit. And that is the key thing to understand about business. And sometimes when you're thinking about an idea, especially a scientific, technical sort of aha idea, like this is a cool thing and everybody's going to want it, one of the most important things to remember is if you can't sell it or do it profitably, you shouldn't be doing it. So move into the business model canvas real quick and talk about value propositions. So value proposition is really all about what are you building and for who? Is there a need or a problem that you're solving? It's about satisfying a customer need. It's not about the idea that you have or the product that you've developed. It's about what needs do customers have that you can solve. You know, this is where people always bring in the Henry Ford quote of, you know, if I'd asked the customers what they wanted, they would have told me they wanted a faster horse, not an automobile. So it's about solving the need that customers have to have transportation or food, clothing, etc. It's not about the specific thing that you've developed. Customer segments is really who are you targeting? Who are the customers and why would they buy from you? So segments can be defined geographically, socially, demographically. You know, we all know of the 18 to 35-year-old male demographic that everybody wants to target because they buy a lot of stuff. But remember, your customers do not exist to buy from you. You exist for them to service and fulfill their unmet needs. And understanding their unmet needs is the key to building a good business. So channels, what's a channel? Channel is simply how does your product get to the customers. And there are lots of different ways to move things to customers. There's obviously web and mobile channels where social media and information technology can get widely distributed very quickly and very cheaply. But if you're talking about a product, whether that be a reagent or sometimes a service, you need to have physical delivery models. You need to have physical activity that gets what you're producing or delivering to your customer. So that's an important component to understand. It's easy to scale and get very profitable as a software company. A lot harder to scale and get profitable if you have a thing that you need to ship to every customer. So channels are really described in a couple of broad ways. One is B2B or business to business, where you sell to other businesses. Oftentimes in the life sciences world, that's a way that people will develop their companies. They'll say, oh, I have an antibody that works really well for this particular type of drug discovery. Well, your customers are not going to be individual drug development scientists, maybe. More than likely, your customer is going to be some company, and you're going to have a business-to-business sales relationship, which is different than a business-to-consumer relationship. And B2C is where you go straight to consumers, and oftentimes people will do web-based direct sales. So a classic example is, you develop a better reagent. You can sell that directly to investigators who will come to your website and buy it. You ship it to them. But you might also be selling to other distributors, etc. So the indirect consumer model and channel is very important to understand. There's costs involved with all of this, right? Some people will say, oh, well, isn't it a lot cheaper just to sell to consumers directly? Well, the answer to that is probably is a maybe, because yes, it seems like it's more profitable to sell 10 units to 10 people for $100, but there are costs involved with the time and effort to do that. If you could sell 10 units to a distributor who then invests the money in selling it through their sales channels, maybe that ends up being more profitable. So it's lots of things to consider as you think about channels. Customer relationships. How do you get, keep, and grow customers? I think this is an important one. And the I think important concept here is this funnel that you see, get, keep, and grow. Getting customers is bringing them into your company. Finding those customers, contacting them, making them aware of your offerings. Keeping customers is all about maintaining your business, keeping it moving. Growing your customers, how do you sell more to the customers you have and find more customers? So customer relationships is like a funnel. It's very simply a funnel. If you have 1,000 people you think would buy your widget, of those 1,000 people, let's say really only about 10% would actually purchase. So your prospects, the people who might actually be qualified to purchase, might only be 10% of those 1,000 people. And then of those 100 prospects, you'd probably be able to close a deal with 10% of those. So of 1,000 people that might be in your potential market, really you might only expect 10% sales. That is an important concept to remember because not everyone in your market is going to be a customer. Not everybody is going to convert and be a purchaser at the same time. So it's very important to think about the sales funnel. If you have a projected, you have an idea that you should sell 50 units a month, oftentimes investors and advisors will ask you, so how big of a sales funnel do you need to get those 50 sales at the end of the month? That's an important question to have an answer to as you go out and think about building your business. The other parts of the sales process are keeping customers, maintaining your current customers because they're going to be your best ideas, best source of new ideas, referrals to new customers, and then revenue. And then growing your business by selling more to your existing customers. Oftentimes people will, or startups will get very hung up on getting new customers and they'll ignore the fact that they've got a customer base of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people who have purchased from them who are highly likely to buy something else from the customer. If you're making them happy, highly likely to be a repeat customer. So happy customers are always your best advertising. Making people happy, and you do that by understanding their need and delivering value that meets those needs. Revenue streams are pretty important. How do you make money? Number of things that you sell times the amount of the price that you sell. So revenue models are different than pricing strategy, and you can spend a whole webinar just talking about pricing for products. But basically, how do you make money? And that's important. What value is the customer paying for, and what price are you charging are critical components of a company. What key resources do you need? What are your most important assets? What financial, physical, intellectual property, and human resources do you need? Can you build a business that you're thinking of with a simple garage and 5 lab techs pipetting? Or do you need a clean room and a whole bunch of freezers or or other facilities? So key resources are important to understand because that's going to drive your model for how much money you need. Who are your partners? Partnerships is all about what do you need to make the business work that you don't have to own. Right? It is not necessary to own and control everything that goes into your business. Oftentimes, when you're a small company, you start out by partnering with people who can provide the things that you can't. For example, if you were selling a small reagent, you might partner with an existing company that has a small warehouse space where you can put your boxes and pay them a small rental fee. Key activities. What are the things that you do that are important to your business? So you produce things. You solve problems in consulting. What sort of supply chain do you have? And how do the things that you do relate to the resources you need and the partnerships that you have? And then finally moving on to cost structures. And all of these things on the left side, your partners, activities, etc., build onto your cost structure. And that is really what do you need to operate this business? You need salaries, you've got rent, is there inventory costs that you're going to incur? Are there things you need to buy to make whatever it is you're going to make? What things are most expensive? What things are least expensive? Oftentimes, if you do the analysis on that, it will surprise you. I think a lot of people get hung up on the idea of rent and facilities, but oftentimes that's really not that big of a cost. So that's the business model canvas in entirely too short of a time frame. But there are some resources that you can follow here and follow up with. In these books, the business model generation, the lean startup, and the startup owner's manual are all fantastic resources for anybody interested in these concepts. We are only able to really provide a quick overview of this. But there's some great websites and other places where you can go get information. So if you Google search Lean Startup, you'll get a whole bunch of information. There's a free online course, the Steve Blank's course that he has taught down at Stanford and Berkeley, I believe, is online and available through Udacity, which is fantastic. So you can sit there and take these courses. I've started that one myself. And the Lean Startup book is a quick read, 250 pages or so of great information about this process. I will say more heavily focused on IT sort of web business models, but still useful for folks thinking about starting a company. And some other videos there that are useful to explain the process. So with that, I think Bruce and I can be open for questions if there are any. And if not, thank you for joining us. Appreciate the time and attention, and hopefully you got something out of this. So any questions, Nick?
Excellent job, Bruce and Nathan. Yeah, thank you guys very much. Excellent job. Thank you very much for presenting this valuable and extremely relevant information. I think you've managed to shed some light on a process that a lot of us with little experience outside of the research lab have generally regarded as complicated and really not very well defined. With the resources and strategies you presented, though, the path from discovery to innovation suddenly seems a little less intimidating. Yeah, so let's move forward with some audience questions. I'll direct them to both of you, so please feel free to either take them individually or collaborate on your response.
Okay.
So this question is regarding specifically chemistry-based innovations. Is the path for creating a chemistry-based business with a physical product different from creating an online company or an app?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, I think it definitely is. I think that's one of the reasons why Nathan said when you read some of these resources, they often tend to be focused on internet-based businesses. So there are some significant differences, but I think in the end you still need to find that value proposition that a customer is going to be willing to pay money for. So a lot of the business model, Canvas things, the Lean Launchpad stuff, all still applies. I think for a lot of, say, chemistry-based or technology-based businesses, the intellectual property component is maybe a little bit larger than it might be in some other areas. You really want to have what's called freedom to operate. And what that means is that you have good patent coverage on your stuff. A lot of people think that a patent is something they own. I think a patent is really your ability to stop other people from crowding into your space. And so you want to make sure you have good intellectual property coverage. But otherwise, I think once you've identified the value proposition, all of these tools would apply equally well whether you're generating a physical product or just some internet-based software thing.
Yeah, I would second that. I think all of this really, at the end of the day, it all boils down to what need or what problem are you solving for a customer. And there are actually in the Startup Owner's Manual book, there are some resources that are more on that sort of touch on the physical product process and how it differs from a web-based startup.
Yeah, and in that sense, the Startup Owner's Manual actually, as it goes through the training, will branch out and do two separate trainings, one for an internet-based product and one for a physical product. So I think the people who have come up with these tools identify that there are differences, but also the similarities outweigh the differences. So if you're really serious about this, I'd say take a look at the Startup Owner's Manual because it'll take you through the process of how to develop a physical product as well as an internet-based product.
Okay. All right. Thanks. You mentioned the importance of IP earlier. I think that's a good segue into another question. So you stress the importance of getting out of the building and making your discovery visible. But should you be concerned about giving too much away when you're going through the business model development process?
No, not at all. Can I answer this?
Yeah.
Not at all, because if you're talking about proprietary technical information, you're not really doing the customer discovery process properly, in my opinion. You want to tell the idea at a high enough level so that you say to the person you're talking to, I have a solution or a potential solution to this kind of a problem. What is your problem? How can what I'm capable of doing solve it? So you can easily tell somebody what you're capable of doing without ever telling them how you do it. And if you're telling them how you do it, then that's kind of missing the point of customer discovery. Customer discovery is identifying what the need is and whether or not you can address and solve that need or that problem. It's not technologically, it's not at the technical level, it's at a higher level. What is the problem? What is the solution? How can I play to solve that problem? So I think most of the time you don't need confidentiality. You just need to ask the questions in the right way and keep it at the higher level of what is the problem, what is the solution, how does it all fit together.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, Bruce is absolutely correct in that if you're getting into the details that would be within a intellectual property realm, then you're too far in the weeds with your customer development process. But I also tell people, and I talk to students all the time, say, oh, I've got an idea, and I can tell you. I can only tell you a little bit about it. I can't tell you the whole thing, because I'm afraid I'll seal it. Fundamentally, most people have busy lives and they have other things going on, and the chances of someone stealing, being so enamored by your idea that they actually want to try to execute on stealing it, are really low. Most people are just there to, you ask them a question, they'll tell you what they think about it, and then they'll go on about their day. They're not going to write it down and take it from you. Now, could that happen? Yes. But for the most part, if you're dealing with people you know or people you respect, they've got other things going on, and you're probably 6 to 9 to 12 months ahead of where they would be, even if they took your idea and tried to steal it. So that's, I think, very important to understand. Confidentiality is great. But you can talk about a lot of things without giving away your secret sauce.
Just to add to that, though, if you do get to the level where it becomes a serious technical discussion, then you do want to make sure you get good confidentiality, non-disclosure agreements in place. Usually make them mutual so that you each have an obligation to, each side has an obligation to remain confidential about whatever is discussed. So there is a place, an important place for confidentiality, non-disclosure agreements, but it typically doesn't have a significant role in the customer discovery process and in building a viable business model.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, for making the distinction between giving too much away and getting too much into the weeds, and Nathan for the reassurance that not everybody's out to steal your idea, or they at least don't have time. We have another question that just came in. Other than being simply different, what are the primary differences between selling business to business as opposed to business to consumer?
Oh, good question. Business to business, usually, and this is just in general terms, usually if you're doing a business to business relationship, you're talking about usually larger volumes of things. You're talking about sort of long-term relationships and contracts and things that are a little more formal, but also a little bit easier to deal with once you get it going. And when you're dealing with direct-to-consumer, oftentimes you're gonna sell and collect at the same time, right? So if you sell something to a consumer, you're gonna take their credit card and you're gonna get the money in your bank that day. You're selling to a business, and this is very important to understand from a cash flow management side of things. You're selling to a business, say a university or a company, they're going to have you send them an invoice, and they're going to pay that invoice when they feel that they're ready to pay that invoice. That might be 30 days, it could be 60 days, sometimes up to 90 days. So it's a big difference, business to business, and business to consumer. So that's one of the key things to think about, is you can sell a lot more into a business, and they'll probably be less put off by sometimes pricing and volume, but you're going to have to wait. You might have to wait a while to get paid. Bruce, other thoughts?
Yeah, and I'd like to add that it also changes your business model. I suspect most people on the call today have heard about BASF, the world's largest chemistry company. They don't sell to customers. They're strictly a business-to-business company. Many of you may not have realized that. And because they're always selling their chemistry products to other companies, they have a completely different business model in terms of how they do what they do, how they partner with their customers. And so I think in addition to the important points that Nathan brought out, it also changes your model and how you operate your business and how you deliver the value. Usually BASF tries to figure out, as I understand it, what a major customer needs, and then they design a customized solution that meets the needs of that particular customer.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have another question on developing your model as well. This came in from U of O. How do you identify potential customers if you're trying to break into a completely new market that does not yet exist?
So if it doesn't yet exist, so if you're sort of making a market, that is the most difficult way to start a company. It has been done, and it's been done many times, but it's very difficult. I think what you have to do there is think about the people who you hypothesize could be your customers, right? If you had, and this is a classic technological innovation, if I had a widget that did X, Y, Z, would you buy that, and what would you pay for that, right? And if it's something, if it's solving a problem that people don't know they have, or they haven't thought about, you know, how important it could be to them, then sometimes it just takes longer, and you're going to have to do more research, and you might have to, you know, draw up more MVPs, minimal viable products, and more concepts and prototypes, and really, you know, none of us, you know, I'll assume here that there are plenty of people that have smartphones on this call. You know, none of us knew that we had a need for a smartphone 5 years ago, but we all have one, and you know, the markets were created. So sometimes it just takes some time and patience, but that's a very difficult way to go.
It's a challenge to your imagination and creativity too. You kind of have to figure it out and be clever. It helps to talk to lots of people, ask for them to give you some input and some ideas. I think most people are willing to help if you present them with something to think about, and they feel like that you know, they can offer something of value to you in helping you to figure it out. But it's I guess another way to put it is it's not obvious, and you got to do a lot of thinking and a lot of hard work and talk to a lot of people.
Okay. So not impossible, but probably, as Nathan said, one of the most difficult ways to go about it.
Yeah, it's not at all impossible. I mean, the recent advancements in genomics are a good example. You know, people didn't know people couldn't even conceive of, you know, 5 years ago people couldn't even conceive of what they would do with you know, a full human genome equivalent of data that they could get in a day, right? But now that can happen. So you know, the sequencing companies and life sciences companies are convincing scientists, okay, well, here's what you could do with that, and they're creating markets for new technologies that way. I think that's a great market to look at in that space. So it's definitely the hardest way to go about it, though.
Yeah, but in that regard, the genomics is an excellent example. You have all the sequence information, but a lot of companies are still trying to figure out where is their niche and where can they provide a value to the customer. Is it whole genome sequencing? Is it targeted sequencing? Is it routine medical diagnostics? Is it pathogens, bacterial diseases? You can go on and on and on. The technology in that area was way out in advance of any of the business applications. So now they have all the technology. They're still trying to figure out what to do with it.
And do you have any specific examples of technologies like the ones you just named that have used this the business model canvas that you presented successfully?
Not that I know of directly, no. I don't know of people who have gone through this process.
Well, I think The company that I'm involved with Darren Johnson, Mike Haley, Calden Stimson Carroll, Super Sensor Technologies. We went through the Lean Launchpad training through the I-Corps with Steve Blank, and I think we've been successful so far, and I think we do represent a modest but nice case study of how, I mean, to be honest with you, I know we only have a couple of minutes left now, but we thought we had it more or less figured out based on the intellectual property that Darren and Mike and Calden had generated, Darren Johnson, Mike Haley, and Calden Carroll. And it turned out that once we went through the customer discovery process, we realized that instead of doing biomedical cellular analysis, a very medical, chemical, biochemical topic, we thought we now have a company that does precision agriculture. So we're out doing agricultural applications when we thought we would have a medical diagnostic company. Complete pivot.
And that all came from your your interactions with customers?
Yeah, we discovered that the greater value of the technology was in the agricultural application, not in the medical application. And there's a clear story there, which is probably a topic of a separate discussion. But to make this point quite simply, we thought based on everything we knew where the application would be, and it would be in some sort of a medical, biochemical application. It turned out to be something completely different.
I guess you really have to be open to revamping all of your expectations and plans in it if you're following this type of model, then, huh?
Yeah, but I say, what we
okay, well,
scientific.
Yeah. I think we're just about out of time, but I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and thank you very much, Bruce and Nathan, for presenting. If you could you summarize a couple of take-home messages for the audience that you think would be best to reemphasize?
I think what I just said probably would be a good way to summarize it, and that is be very scientific in your hypothesis generation and testing, and have an open mind, because you may have a great technology, but your first ideas may not be the ones that actually have the greatest business value. So be scientific, be rigorous, ask a lot of questions, and keep an open mind.
And I would add, for scientists, don't let the business side of things scare you off from this process. If you can focus on customer needs and develop a product that people want, the quote-unquote business side of things in terms of setting up accounting and getting money and all that stuff really is a lot easier to work through once you've identified a customer need, and figured out how to deliver something to them. The businessy stuff all comes relatively easily once you've established that there's a customer base who will buy what you will sell. So don't let the idea of starting a business discourage you from the fact that you are good at going out and asking questions, testing hypotheses, and then figuring out a solution for people's problems.
That is excellent advice. I think very poignant too. From my own perspective, I think the business side of things can be very intimidating, but I think your presentation and discussion today has really kind of helped alleviate some of that. Well, again, thank you everyone for attending. This webinar has been recorded and will be placed on the ECOS VC website as well as the CSMC website. And please join us for our future webinars. They are listed at the sites here on this slide, and we hope to see you again in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye.